Hey,
Oh, I have to say okay. Okay. I said okay.
we're both Lisas.
We are both Lisas. It's going to be so confusing.
Two Lisas. Both of us are therapists. We're both social workers as well.
Mhm. And we
And we,
both live in the DC metro area.
yep, and we both went to Catholic University.
Uh-huh. Are there
Yep,
any more?
lots. There are probably lots more. But that's our intro. We're, two therapist Lisas, and we want to talk a little bit today about um, breaking up the kind of normative ideas around how arrange, what kind of is acceptable with marital or long-term relationship arrangements. And because people get into a lot of conflict when there's serious imbalances in the domestic labor, the cognitive labor, and then another concept that Lisa and I kind of came across in the spring, which is the emotional labor, the tending of the relationship, which Dr. Carmen Knudsen Martin defined as the circle of care. And the circle of care is sort of like ground zero. If that is truly mutual and reciprocal, usually most relationship problems can be worked out. But that means that you're both doing perspective taking, you're both paying attention to each other, you're attuning to each other, you're accommodating each other's needs, you're being influenced by each other so you can negotiate win-win durable agreements, and you both actually take responsibility. You're accountable to the relationship. It's not usually balanced in heterosexual relationships, which is why people go to couple therapy.
Yes.
Do you have?
And I would add to that, because I've been noticing this. I think those things are very increasingly hard to achieve. There is the gender part, which is very real. And I feel like we have to address that in a capitalistic society where like earning a living and supporting a family and paying a mortgage and all of those things is increasingly hard to do. It is, there is a time constraint. I mean, there is a very real logistical time and energy constraint. And I think those may impact men and women differently, and that's very real too. But I feel like I want to just name that too, because as you're naming those things, I'm like, those things take a lot of time and energy. And increasingly, I feel like people don't even have time to be friends anymore. It's just really painful. So I think that's real.
Yeah, and the other part of being in a capitalist society is it's adversarial, it's competitive, and it's individualistic. So
Yes.
totally goes against what we know kind of healthy relationships should look like, which are mutual, reciprocal, collaborative.
Yes.
And so a lot of people don't even have the skills and don't even know what that looks like. Um, so I wanted to get us started just talking about maybe breaking up a fundamental assumption around long-term relationships and marriage. And that is the default setting of we have to live together. Um, there, or even like we have to live together in a home without anyone else. Like we're even kind of isolated. It's, that heteronormative model of a man and a woman with children in a sealed box living together. That's the default. So what if we don't accept that? What if we're just going to like say, no, that isn't, we don't have to do that? Then what happens? What is the default setting?
What if couples were allowed to decide their own default setting based on what they want to offer, what they can offer, what they want their life to look? I mean, I've been thinking more and more about how the pain that I see couples in and that got us starting to have these conversations could be vastly eliminated if that box were gone. Because in many ways, I don't see them always fighting each other. They are both fighting this norm and they feel like they're failing. And I sometimes just want to be like, what if you didn't live together, or you didn't sleep in the same room, or you didn't sleep in the same bed, or like these very, and it's like, but oh, but then that means that we're not a good couple, we're not a happy. But when you watch, I've been like learning a lot about ethical non-monogamy because I have people in my life starting to do it. And once I mean, I used to think I was like, that is insane. That is an insane thing to do. You're just going to blow up your life. But when you get into it, what I've been learning watching them is like what it is it's people very clearly stating, this is what I can offer. So, for instance, like a man who is like, I work all the time. I'm a workaholic. Maybe he's neurodivergent. He's like, I got one night a week that I have the energy to like have a relationship with somebody. And he's looking for somebody who needs one night a week of attention. And I heard that and I was like, wow, how much better would that be than him being beat up every day by a wife who's like, why won't you talk to me? Why won't you engage with me? I'm a failure because my husband doesn't want to talk to me every night. It's like, how clarifying. And then it doesn't have to be there's something wrong with somebody.
Right.
But we are not given any models or options as heteronormative people and couples to even have a conversation about how do we want to set this up for ourselves? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? We are not taught to even ask ourselves any questions about it.
Yeah, yeah. And even like that first initial moving in together, which a lot of people do before they get married. Um, Now when I have people at that stage, I say, treat it as an experiment. Make it clear that you are trying this out, but if it doesn't work, you will be reverting back to living separately. Like, don't make living together the crux of the relationship.
Well, and maybe you can even stay together.
Right.
Because
You
what
can,
people do is it's like, oh, the living together didn't work out, but I love this person and now I have to break up and now you're back and it's like maybe you're going to decide, oh, we actually like each other a lot more. We still love each other, but we should live like in a duplex next door or in a condo building. And that's what if that were okay? But we end up in these binary like I must live together and love him and blah 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 or nothing. And the binary I think is really not good for people.
no, and my daughter has like she has a really good group of friends. They live in Washington, D.C. And one of her closest friends has a baby. She's pregnant, due to have another one. She lives in a group house in Adams Morgan with these old friends. They're a married couple with children. Everybody else is single. I don't know how big the house is, but I think there are three other adult roommates. And they're very happy together. So they've worked out the domestic labor piece of it. And guess what? They put the monitor on and they go out in the evening. There's somebody always there in the house who's willing to listen, keep an ear out for the baby. So they have a huge amount of freedom that most people with little kids don't have. And there are a lot of single people who actually like children, but don't want to have them.
Or can't have them or don't have the money to have them or don't want to get the marriage to and don't want to do it alone or like and we are so unnecessarily under resourcing ourselves with this box.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you hear it, but I hear a lot of especially women, but not even just the women, it's almost all people. The single friends feel like, oh, the married people don't need me. So there's this rupture in that relationship. And the married people are like, the minute we got married, all of our single friends just like stop calling because there's this, and everybody's hurt and everyone's lonely. And it's like, this is so, but it's because we've privileged marriage and coupledom and everyone is sad about it. And it's causing these ruptures that are like based on nothing. It's
I
so
think
silly.
it's based on the box,
Yeah.
box is sealing people up and separating them. And then there's stories that people tell themselves around, oh, well, the single people are having, you know, a really good time and we're suffering. And the single people are thinking the coupled up people are happy, and often nobody's happy.
No, I mean, I remember when my first friends got married, had a baby. They had been married when I met them, and they had their first child, and I was probably early 30s, mid 30s, and I kept like begging to go to their house or like watch their kids, and they were like, you don't want to do that. You and we're I mean, we're still friends. This didn't cause a rupture, but it was always like, your life is so exciting. You don't want to do that. We don't want to bother you. And it was like, no, I actually want to be around a family. Like that feels nice to me. But it was this, again, this like weird, and it was just like, this really is not necessary. I'll come over to your house every Sunday. Like, and it's really sad, and we have a loneliness epidemic.
And also with children, you know, you get fried as a parent.
Mhm.
And it's quite different to come in and hang out with children for 3 hours. You know, I mean, I'm at the point my kids are grown. I would like that. That would be, you know, but do I want to do it for, you know,
Right.
12 hours? No, maybe not. But, you know, filling in for short amounts of time.
Newsflash, parents don't want to do it for 12 hours either, which is why, I mean, we are not meant. I don't think it's good for children to only have like one or two significant adults in their life, and I don't think it's good for the two adults. Like, people need multiple mirrors. They have different emotional needs. And I keep thinking about how psychology and psychotherapy just constantly comes back to like, well, the person is messed up because they didn't get the whatever from the mother. I mean, I just read a paragraph about that and was like, ah. And it's like, what one person or two people can fill all these needs? It's a weird idea when you think
Well,
about it.
you've just hit on something important because, you know, those adverse childhood events, the, those are things that nobody can do really anything about. Like they're pretty much, you know, those are crappy, lousy things that happen, but they have a positive, I don't know if you've heard of the PACEs, the positive childhood events. And one of them is having long-term relationships with people outside the family system, for the child to have those people in their lives. And most of those positive childhood events are things you can control. You
Yeah.
can't do a lot about the adverse ones.
And I haven't seen the Pacers, but I feel like in every list that I read of protective, what we call protective factors in social work, things that like will right trauma or protect a child from the psychological effects of a ACE or a bad event, it is always another adult, like another caregiving. It's always the extended. And it's when we get people into these small boxes that, of course, there's no resilience against those things. Like everybody's traumatized. If you have an alcoholic parent and a parent focusing on trying to keep the alcoholic parent from not hurting the kids, everyone is a mess.
Yeah.
Everyone's traumatized in that system. You need someone outside of that to provide the care. And we are deluding ourselves. And then people feel like, oh, I failed at this. Instead of, it reminds me of when people say they fail at diets, and it's like, yeah, diets don't work. You're not, it's the box that is the problem. We are not failing at it. It's a bad idea.
Also, a lot of my clients have had really abusive homes, they find second families.
Mhm.
Kids are such good scavengers. They've got somebody within walking distance, often they find, who
Yeah,
understands that they have sanctuary.
right.
Um, I was going to say the other thing about living together is that the domestic standards are set as a group. So it's not one person monitoring another person. It's spread around the group. It fixes that problem. So you live with people that you like their hygiene standards. You might even share meals, share the labor of cooking together. Um, and there's a bunch of models for that. There can be like, you know, a house. It could be people that all move into an apartment building who are close and connected. It could also be Radish in Oakland. is a really interesting housing model. It's like a housing cluster. And they
Oh, yeah.
built around each other, and they have shared dining room. So someone is paid kind of pay in to cook. And everyone has dinner together. The leftovers are put in the fridge for lunch. You don't have to provide food for your family. Everybody eats there. They have shared common areas. You don't have to plan to see friends. There's always somebody around.
Mhm.
It's child-centered. So they have like baby happy hour at a certain time of day. They've got an adult area and a baby area. And the other thing I really like about it, it's an LLC, so people can buy shares, and you can invest in the property without living there. So some people are invested and some people rent. So it's got sort of multiple levels
Hmm.
of income, which is kind of cool. I think we have to think outside the box.
We need better imaginations. I think that's,
Mhm.
and because the other piece I'm thinking about as you're saying this is, so let's say you get somebody who comes in, they have the agreement, yes, I will do XYZ, and then they start not doing the agreement, which we know is what happens in heterosexual marriages. The man says, "Oh, I want to be an equal partner." Really, what he means is, "I wish for you to make my life really nice and wonderful, and I don't really have to do anything." And, that's what I mean by equal partner. I honestly, at this point, don't even think they know they're lying. I think they're so, anyway. But the because I run a lot of therapy groups, and while therapy groups can go very wrong, in a healthy functioning group, if a group can do a much better job of holding someone accountable, because when it's just one person, it's too easy to say,
Mhm.
"Oh, well, your demands are too high," or "You want to, blah, blah." You can just write, and this is true of all people. It's not just men and women, it's not just in marriage. Whereas if I'm imagining a group where, let's say, somebody's not doing the dishes or they're leaving the common area dirty, and the group can kind of get together and be like, "Well, oh yeah, I've seen that too. I've noticed that too." You could have "Oh, well, okay, you know what, he's had the flu for the last like week, so you could have like." And people tend to behave much better in groups, is what is what I notice, than in dyads. And so when you have a patriarchal system where the woman is already disempowered, you're walking in the door that way, she doesn't stand much of a chance, really, other than in pulling a leverage card of "I'm going to leave you,"
Yeah.
of like getting much behavior change. Whereas, nobody wants to be embarrassed in front of a group or slacking. You're going to get much less bad behavior and bad faith acting, I think.
Yeah, I think that accountability piece goes up as long as everyone is comfortable talking about gender and gender jobs. I actually I don't think I told you this, I live in a supposedly co-housing community. And uh, the shared work is mainly conservation work. And one of the things that became very apparent, because we take care of we do a lot of taking care of the forest and there's a lot of meadow restoration, we all get paid for. We get $15 an hour, which is kind of nice. Um, but it is very gendered around who does what work. Men will do work if they sit on a machine.
You emailed me about this. This was
Yeah.
so interesting.
Well, I mean, there are a few men in the community. Paul, my partner, Paul, will do work, not sitting on a machine. But it's like we call it handwork. The women have noticed this. The women will be the ones getting on their hands and knees, clipping down the invasives, treating them, um, doing the weeding in the shared gardens, doing the
Yeah,
grubby.
stuff that's harder on your body, takes
Yeah.
more attention to see, takes more time. Yeah.
So, and this is not a community that's comfortable talking about this gender divide. So I would say that probably is,
Yeah.
it has to be, we can't, you can't have, um, you can't not have that as part of your conversation. And you know, it solves the domestic labor. It doesn't take care necessarily of the cognitive piece if you've got children. All of those emails back and forth to teachers, the doctor's appointments, the buying the right kind of eczema cream, the, you know, well, you're right in the thick of it.
Finding the doctors, finding the therapist, noticing, oh, my child is struggling. I have to like solve that problem. Reading the parenting books to figure out what's going on, like, you know, talking to all the consultants or yeah, it's a lot of work, both tedious and tiny, as well as like the attuned attention work. Oh, oh, you know, my kid just broke up with their person and like they're really sad and I got to figure out what to do about that. It's like such a range.
Right. And that's the also the emotional labor that you're doing for the kids.
Right.
Be really imbalanced and often is imbalanced. Yeah, so that doesn't solve that issue. However, neither does getting divorced. So just to be clear,
Divorce just makes it more complicated.
yeah, and we're not opposed to divorce. Divorce is great. Like, we're just talking about what if you don't want to get divorced. You should understand that if you have the situation prior to divorce, it's probably not going to change. You're going to be able to redirect your emotional labor elsewhere. You're going to finally be able to manage your household the way you want. A lot of women find after divorce, they don't have as much domestic labor because they're not cleaning up after another adult. They also usually get half the childcare now taken care of. So they're like free as birds. They're super, super happy. Nobody talks about this, but women have a huge workload burden come off their shoulders with divorce, except for the cognitive load.
Right.
That seems to continue. Women continue to do that oversight of the care, like the health, education,
When
emotion.
you have more logistics because you have like kids going back and forth, you have like the laundry, the moving, you know, what goes in the bag for this week at the school and the like that's what I mean by the like it's, you know, it's the cognitive load I imagine would go up in that situation and maybe some of the financial burden or financial load I think can go up with divorce, but I think about that all the time where like there's free time for both people. And I honestly think for many parents that are deeply stressed and work all like that's interesting, like actual time off. And we don't if you don't have like relief anywhere, that's one way to get it. Like we again assume, oh, divorce is bad, but it's like for some parents and couples, it actually might not be. There are many reasons it isn't. But we, of course, you have to feel shame and embarrassed, and I've failed. And it's like, or did you figure out an arrangement that works better? I mean, you know.
Well, I think women are a lot happier,
Hmm.
but you have a lot of angry divorced men
Yeah.
who are really pissed off about having to do things that they didn't do before. Now, you know, now they have the kids 50% of the time. So I think it's beneficial from, and by the way, the research shows that after 5 years, there's an economic decline for women for 5 years, and it can be very, very tough in those early years. I know it was for me, but after 5 years, women really move forward.
Bounce back.
You have so much more time, and they're able to excel at their jobs, take a second job, you know, do whatever it takes. Yeah, so I think there's some myths around divorce that are designed to scare the crap out of women.
Well, and the other thing that I think we do that I'm starting to become more aware of as I work with a lot of couples and a lot of women is what I tell women now is okay, if you want to get married, if you want to have kids or with I have a lot of women come to me because they're ambivalent about one of the two. And I say, like, look at the marriages and the parents around you. Everybody's got friends that are married. You know, you have like everybody has a supply of, and I say, look at those marriages and talk to the people in those marriages. Talk to the moms, talk to the dads, but also use your own eyes and ears because not everybody's going to tell you the truth and observe. And then and then ask yourself, do I want that? What I am seeing with my own eyes and ears is this life? Do I think that my temperament, my lifestyle, my wishes align with that? And then the trick Because what I think women do, or maybe all of us do, I don't know if men do it too, is they say, oh, but that won't happen to me.
Mhm.
I can pick the right guy. We blame when we see the unhappy marriages, when we see the parents struggling and being completely miserable and like getting no support, we somehow attribute it because we are in an individualistic culture. We say, "Oh, that's the fault of those two people." And
Right.
I will choose a better partner. I am a feminist. I won't let this happen to me. And we trick ourselves and we have, and so I tell people, I'm like, look at what you are seeing and assume you are the American exceptionalism, so help me, is getting us everywhere because we tend to and I have a lot of women now that I sit with that say, I really thought I'm realizing that all those friends that I judged and said, this will never be me, are me. And it's like, so I really say, like, let's sit with this, assume it's reality. Is it what you want? Because you're not going to do it better or different. And that the world is not going to, really, it's a failure of support in our society, is really what's happening. Society is going to support you no better than the women around you.
Well, I don't think people are honest,
Mm-mm.
and um, the system doesn't support women being really honest. I don't think they're always honest to therapists. They are so pressured to present the happy family, the happy marriage. And I honestly think that the ability to gauge whether something is mutual or not gets skewed if that person is doing all the emotional labor. They tend to then, over time, they're doing a lot of the perspective taking, they're living in their partner's mind. So they tend to, the voice in their head is not necessarily theirs. It's
That's
every.
a good point.
So I don't think we even get an accurate idea. I think it's, you're sort of talking about young people thinking about entering into this institution. And even if it looked good or it was good before having kids, it looks completely different afterwards.
Yeah.
Um, and you're also saying, where are your agreements? What do you want? Let's have conversations.
Yes,
People
I
don't,
do a lot about agreements.
they don't,
And
they don't have any. A lot of people don't have.
we are taught nothing. You just agree to get married. The proposal is the end. And now I'm like, what are you agreeing to? What is this? But I very few heteronormative white, it's like that conversation is so scary for people. I agree with you. It takes so long for women, especially, but even the men, to become honest about what's happening in the relationship, what's not working, we have people pleasing and all this like managing other people so baked in. But then getting people to negotiate agreements, there's such a terror of it will all fall apart
Mhm.
that no one wants to even have the conversation. And I'm like, how can we have real intimate relationships if we don't even know what we're signing up for? And then can hold people accountable to when the agreements fall apart.
Yeah. And the agreements require a lot of the skills that are part of the circle of care to do the attuning, the accommodating, the perspective taking, and the uh, uh, what's the other word? Tuning, accommodating, perspective taking, and being influenced by the other person. If you're not doing those things, you can't come to durable agreements. You come to crap agreements that don't last.
Right.
So if you're coming up against that, it's probably because the emotional labor is really skewed. I'm not sure. Do you think like any of these solutions, because a lot of the solutions tackle the domestic labor part, somewhat the emotional labor part when it comes to like, at least I won't be lonely, at least I'll have some other people in the household or nearby to communicate with. It's not going to create intimacy. It's not going to solve an intimacy
Oh,
in your relationship if it's already.
oh no. And what's very interesting is when I talk to women, especially about why do you want to have a baby and why do you want to get married, the number one reason is because I won't be lonely anymore. And then when you boil that down and you say, I'll say to them, like, mothers are some of the most lonely, it's one of the most isolated, lonely groups on the planet. Like, and I'll, talk to them about like, do your married friends seem like lonely, happy, engaged? And they can kind of, then they will acknowledge, I want the social status. What always happens is it's a like, oh, I think I don't even believe it's going to make me not lonely. I see evidence around me that that's not the case, but I will trade that because I want the social privilege. I want the legitimacy. I want, to be seen as, it's really the pain of how we stigmatize singlehood. We infantilize it, we stigmatize it. And I feel like when you really talk to people, that's what they're trading on. And they
Is,
think it's going to come with this like fulfillment, and then they get in the deal and it's like, "Oh." And once I have kids, oh wow, the social thing just got flipped on its head and now nobody appreciates me and it's like the whole thing just comes crumbling down. But then like you're saying, it's very challenging. Women in the groups I run do admit it to each other. It takes a long time, but it's very challenging, I think, for women to be honest and to admit to each other, this is a bit of a scam. This is not what I thought I was signing up for.
yeah, we need like an anonymous survey. Like Sure Height sent out all those thousands of surveys to find out what women really, like what they were really experiencing with sex. It would be really interesting to do that with women who are in married and long-term relationships. Do you think like this, it's the status, but also the belief then I will, be secure? Like it's
Yeah.
feeling of like now I have somebody forever. Not that I won't be lonely, but now I won't be alone. And I will definitely, I'm keeping somebody. I'm now
Yeah.
keeping.
Oh, well, people will say that. Like that it's not just for some people it's the emotional security, it's the like I don't want to have to keep looking and going on, so yes, absolutely. It's like I know I always have a date. But it's not even often that they want like an emotional connection. It is the like, it's like, I just want to know I have a date, right? And it's like, if we are already setting a frame of a pretty shallow, and that's not to say that I think all married couples, but when you really listen, there is a sort of like young kind of these young sort of immature assumptions about what this arrangement is when you really start listening to people, and they know that it's not what they're seeing around them. They know it's not what their parents had. But and so yeah, I think it gets it's really, and I think that the financial security part, especially as inflation grows, as things become, that part makes sense to me. It's like, and that you almost, and I hear people saying, I don't even know if I want a husband or a wife. I'm like tired of doing this by myself. I'm exhausted. The labor is exhausting. And I
Mm.
sometimes talk with people about like, well, maybe you want to go on field and like be real direct about what you want. And maybe there's either a roommate or someone else wants a partnership where that might be non-monogamous. Like, I'm trying to help people think about maybe you should just name what you want with people instead of assuming if I want that, I must be in a romantic heteronormative marriage.
Yeah.
That
Well,
seems to be the leap people are making. And it's like they're missing some of the costs, and then everybody's also walking into a deal and it's sort of covert from the beginning in some ways.
yeah. When I was in college, there was a group of, I mean, most of my friends were my age. They were older. They had, jobs already. They had already graduated from college, but they lived in the town. And they had, I think there were like five of them. They had made the commitment to each other to take care of each other, to be each other's family. And they bought a house together. They, didn't have at that point plans to get married or have children, but they wanted commitment. And that's the other part. I was like, why can't you commit to people that you're not married to.
Right, that you're not romantically involved with, that you're not, and that is such a, it shouldn't be a weird idea. I mean, I've had girlfriends in my life for decades longer than my partner that I'm married to. Like, I mean, it's like we are committed, but it's such a, and I wish I could remember. I just read a book about this. I think it was Sonia and Renee Taylor, but there's a beautiful book about how we are not given skills. And again, it's the privileging of marriage. We are not given any validation for those relationships or any sort of way to structure that. There's not very many, like you're talking about models, which I think is awesome, but I think we need more models, and models that are not like, oh, and then it failed, and so it's like, well, I guess marriage is the only model that works, because I feel like that's what you see, are these like doomsday tales. And for people to talk more about, I'm really encouraging people to talk more about, what do you actually want when you say like you want marriage, and like break it down, because then they can maybe at least carve an agreement with themselves about first. I'm like, let's get to an agreement with yourself about what you want.
As we're kind of winding down, I realized we didn't really tell people that we're married. We're both married.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
We're here trashing marriage. It's like,
Yeah, well, which is probably super annoying to single people.
right, but yeah, so like but I think we have something to say about this, not just, I'm on this is my second marriage, because we get the inside scoop
Well,
from,
we're married, we're living it, and we, as a couples therapist, right, we are watching it. And I'm just watching this. What I feel like I'm learning is this box is causing people so much pain.
yeah, yeah, we need to smash the box.
Yeah.
All
Yeah.
right, good, smash the box. All right, well, should we sign off?
Yeah.
Okay, pause.